check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. You know what app I use on my phone more than any other app, besides the podcast app, to listen to this here podcast? I use onX. onX Maps is the most comprehensive mapping system for hunters on the market today. I use it all the time. When I was in New Mexico, I was looking at 40,000 acres of ranch that I needed to learn. I flip open onX and just start studying the map. When I'm riding trails, I put the tracking app on. It helps me get around in strange country. I could mark water sources, food sources, bear sign, just all kinds of options within onX. You need to check out onX Maps by going to houndsmanxp.com. Click on the link on our sponsor page. You'll go right to onX Maps, and when you check out, enter the code HXP20 and you will get 20% off of your order. Know where you stand with onX.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Before we get started into this next episode, I want to say thank you to all of you who have signed up to become Extras members. I hope you're enjoying the new content that you're getting each month. And for those of you that haven't signed up and are interested, you can go to my website at falconrychronicles.com and click on the Would You Like to Support link and sign up. You'll get at least a few new episodes, couple or 3 new episodes or so each month, one of which is usually a video episode. And I'm also getting ready to start a new video series on there called Let's Talk About That Flight, where I have falconers on and we kind of analyze and discuss some of their favorite recorded hunts and flights and things like that throughout the season. So I'm really doing my best to earn your continued support, and it's going a long way towards helping to pay for the continued cost of this podcast. So if you want to see things keep going and also get something in return for your support, I'd really appreciate the help, and I really hope you enjoy.
Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
And now, on to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
So she had a tendency to want to bait way out, and I tried to hold her back. One time I let her go, and she just took off. I mean, straight in a beeline. I knew she saw Jack, but I thought, where the heck? I tracked her down 2 miles, and when I got there, she had already killed it and was eating it. It was I'm guessing that rabbit was almost a mile away. That I did notice that in the Siberians. Some of them, not all of them. They're all different. But that bird was unbelievable. And when she does take off, it's full speed the whole time, no cruising. But yeah, that was like a 2-mile flight. So I will never forget that one.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast. And we're still kind of in the time frame of around last July or so. Not only did I go up and record those episodes that you just heard up at Ian Anderson's place, but that was also when I recorded in Reno with Dave Jamieson and a few other guys, including our guest for this episode, Mark Moglich. And there's probably plenty of you out there that have heard of Mark or been familiar with him or even acquired a bird from him. He's been a falconer for a long time and been a breeder for a long time as well. So there's a lot of collective knowledge that he has to share, and I was happy to be able to make this trip and get some recordings done during this time, because there's a lot of good collective knowledge I was able to get on record during this trip out to Reno. So thanks again also to my buddy Vahe for helping to set all of this up last summer, and I hope that you enjoy these other few episodes that I was able to record while I was out there. So anyway, I will go ahead and turn things over to this conversation with Mark Moglich, and here we go. Around what area do you live in again?
I live in Gardnerville, which is below Carson City and near Lake Tahoe.
Cool. Yeah,
the Carson Valley.
Okay. Yeah, I've not ever made it any secret that geographically I'm a moron. Me and geography, I'm better than what I used to be, just simply because I've done so much traveling for this and for work and stuff over the years. But yeah, no, I mean, I always like finding out where people are from and kind of what their area is like. You know, I mean, I'm assuming that over the years, I mean, that's been predominantly more long wing type area, or is it more suitable for short wings? Or?
Well, in the Gardnerville area, it's a nice cold climate. I'm at 5,500 feet elevation.
Okay.
So it's really good climate for flying falcons, but also for goshawks.
Yeah.
All hawks, but I'm a goshawker, and a falconer, and I fly falcons, and it's been a very good area for that.
Okay. Well, and I mean, have you lived around that area your whole life pretty much, or you
No, I grew up in Walnut Creek, California.
Okay. Yeah.
And I moved back out to Nevada in 1998. Just for the falcons, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to hunt sage grouse, and to hunt sage grouse, I wanted to come to Nevada. I used to get in my car at 3 a.m. in California, jump in my car, and be at a grouse field at 7 a.m. And there's no state income taxes in Nevada. And I kept telling my wife for years, we got to get the heck out of California. And now with everything going on, I'm glad I'm out of California. But we moved then, and it was a good time because my kids were young, like 6 years old. My daughter was 8. We moved over to Gardnerville. It's a beautiful valley. It's very green. It's very lush. Lots of water. Beautiful panoramic view of the Sierra Nevada. You got lots to do. You got Lake Tahoe. You got Reno. And I was only 30 minutes from hunting grouse. But of course, 3-4 years after I moved here, Fish and Game closed that area. So now to hunt sage grouse, you have to go 3, 4, 5 hours.
Well, and what was their reasoning for closing that area? Just
the area. One of the areas I like to go to, they claim that they're a subspecies and they need to be protected. I don't know all the reasoning.
Gotcha.
There's still a lot of grouse there, but we can't hunt them anymore.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. But I grew up in Walnut Creek, and in Walnut Creek, when I was 12 years old, my father came home with a red-tailed hawk. My father was in the apartment business. He had apartments all over California. And one time he went and saw this goshawk on the balcony of one of the apartments. So he went up to the door and talked to the guy. He says, and the guy got all freaked out like he was going to kick him out or something. He says, "Oh, no, I'm just interested in your bird." And the guy said, "Well, it's a passage goshawk from Germany." Back then, you could just order one, they put it in the box and send it to you. So my dad went out hunting with him one day, and the guy caught 5 ducks in the canals down there, and it was in the Silicon Valley area. And he was sold on it. So then the guy gave him a red-tailed hawk and he brought it home a few weeks later, and that was the beginning of falconry.
And so you were in it from a pretty early age then. You said 12? Was that what you just said?
I was about 12 when he did that. But before that, I read a book by, I can't remember the author, but the book was called Weeps, W-E-E-P-S, about a great horned owl and how I got it out of the nest. A kid my age got this owl and raised it. And so I was already infatuated with birds of prey. So then when my dad came on with the red-tailed hawk, that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even tell you how many people that I've talked to. It's just seems like in the book world, the common denominator most of the time, of course, is My Side of the Mountain and others.
That book too.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, I'm not familiar with that book though. The Weeps book. I'll have to look into that. I believe it or not, I didn't read My Side of the Mountain until within the last year or two.
Really, and there's a movie too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've heard a lot about the movie and stuff. I had always heard a lot about the book, of course, but I finally, after all these years, was just like, all these people keep talking about it and everything. It wasn't. When I was in school, it wasn't mandatory reading in any of my classes like it was for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know, but yeah. So I mean that's cool. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people that I talk to whose parents are involved with it, and that's how they get interested and stuff. But I mean, there's a lot of people also that they grow up with it and just don't care either. Like my kid is one of them.
I was pretty obsessed with it. In fact, I remember in school, I would just daydream about going and looking for nests all the time. Mm-hmm. That was even in college. Like I always just wanted to get out and look for nests and look for birds of prey. And here it is. So I'm 67 now. So what's that? 55 years later, I'm still into it, but it evolved into breeding in the early 90s.
And so how many years do you think that you were an active falconer before you got an interest in breeding then? About what was the gap there?
Well, I got my falconry license when I was 16. Mm-hmm. And I was flying birds until... so I was 30, about 30 when I got. So what happened was the people were getting free birds from like the P Fund and everything back then. I wasn't that lucky. You got to kind of kiss their butts and stuff, and I'm not a kiss butter type, so I didn't get any birds. So my thing is, I got to go make some money so I can go buy some birds. And this is how I met Dave Jamieson and Steve Baptiste. So I got into marketing and started making quite a bit of money. And I started buying birds, gyrfalcons, peregrines, trying to get really nice birds. And back then, a gyrfalcon was pretty special. Not many were being bred yet. I got some from Dave Jamieson in 1988 and Steve Baptiste, some of the first gyrs I got. I started breeding them in, I think, 1991, the first time I bred gyrs in California. And from there, I started holding back stock and accumulating birds over the years. And then finally, in the later 90s, I started getting contacts from overseas for birds. And it just kind of evolved into a business to the point where I could make a living doing it.
So you kind of had to branch into it before you started doing.
Yeah, and I got in probably at the right time before it was. Now there's lots of breeders all over the world. It's not the same, but back then, it was only a few of us breeding.
Yeah.
And I used to drive up to Reno all the time and see Dave and Steve, and I'd always get excited every year about picking up a new bird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back then, of course, I'm sure there was a lot more demand than there was supply. Like you said, there's a lot more people now all over the world that are in different avenues of breeding and stuff. But that's So basically, I mean, did you always have the goal of commercial breeding in mind, or did you just kind of segue into that naturally?
Well, around the early 90s, I was thinking about breeding because I wanted to breed because I'm infatuated, especially with the gyrfalcon. Mm-hmm. Something about the gyrfalcon. I saw one at a Los Banos California Hawking Club meet by John Zobel. He had a wild gyrfalcon. It was the first time I ever saw a wild gyrfalcon. John Zobel. And when I saw that bird, it was like, wow. It was an impressive bird. You never saw them around. But then I said, I got to breed those someday. I wasn't really thinking about making money doing it. I was just thinking I'd like to breed them. Mm-hmm. And then I could have one to fly and have, because they're so rare. And when something rare like that makes you want one.
Sure.
So I started breeding mostly from that just because it was a bird I really was impressed with.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the people that stick with it the longest are the ones that have it more in just the mind, like for the personal aspect of it and just their motivation because they love that particular species or whatever. It seems like I have noticed over the years that the people that tend to not last very long in breeding are the ones that really kind of have the more commercial mindset involved, because people kind of discover quickly that there's not quite as much money to be made in it as what they initially, thought and stuff. But
yeah, and now somebody getting started in it, it's pretty late to the game, so to speak. I mean, it's changed a lot. Now you need to make something nobody has. A couple special birds. Fortunately, I make a couple of those a year, and but that would be something that hardly anybody else has. Something really special and unique, like almost all white, just something really special. And then it's, the shape, the size, and then how they fly. So my favorite falcon to fly is a jerkin, male gyr. I mean, to me, it's the perfect size. And for a sage grouse, it's the perfect size. The tercels are more aerial, in my opinion, than the female. Females tend to come and tap and chase and fly long distances and get killed more easily by an eagle. I mean, it's a risk no matter what when you hunt sage grouse. But I love flying jerkins, and so that was the other reason why I wanted to breed them, because my love for flying them.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of people that eventually they stick with it, and their main motivation to continue with that is so, whether they're in abatement or whether they're doing other things or whatever, they mainly just don't want to have to rely on someone else producing birds for them. They just,
Well, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
That's another good reason. Probably half the other reason I got into breeding. Trying to get a bird from a breeder, you're not going to get the best. You're not going to get first choice. So when you breed birds, you get first choice. And that was a very good reason for getting into breeding.
So, I mean, how long did it take you after, backing up again real quick too, I mean, how long did it take you to kind of work up to flying, I don't know, these birds that are in your mind anyway, like your ideal falconry? I mean, did you fly many other species before you started flying?
So in the mid 70s, I flew red tails, and then I used to fly 2 female Harrisocks in a cast. And these birds were phenomenal. And in California at that time, there was lots of open fields in the Bay Area. San Francisco Bay Area, Walnut Creek Bay Area. And I used to go out to these fields, and these Harrisocks were just deadly. This was back when the Harrisocks were just becoming known. Hardly anybody knew much about them yet. There were none overseas yet, or they were just starting. And they were like a red tail, but they were a little quicker. They're real nice to handle. And so that's what I started with. The red tail, the Harrissock, and then I got a Goshawk when a few years later. And that was a whole nother ball game. Hyper, but I had, I really liked that next step up, even though they're a lot more maintenance. They're not, a Harrissock, you can just fly it on the weekend. A Goshawk, you got to stay on top of it every day. And, but the speed and acceleration of a Goshawk over the Harrissock was just, like, wow. Kind of like the gyrfalcon over the prairie falcon. It was like, wow. So I was hooked on gyrfalcons, and I was hooked on Goshawks, and I'm still hooked on Goshawks, and I can tell you more about that later.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the main sticking point. A lot of reasons why the people go over to the gray side, so to speak, over the dark side.
Yeah.
Is because, I mean, people get addicted, even though it's like you said, it's more maintenance, and in some birds' cases, just a lot more issues potentially to deal with. A lot of people get addicted to what they describe as just that lunch off the fist, and then just that initial burst of speed that you get from the goshawks and everything. And I know that's why people get addicted to them. And the people that I know, I mean, seen goshawks fly since the moment I got into falconry, and that's the reason. I mean, people just keep citing that over and over again. You know, I just
when you see a goshawk sometimes get up 5-6 times and then finally nail it on that 6th try, all in the same flight, it's like, wow. I mean, harrishawks, they'll do get up repeatedly, but nothing like a goshawk. But a harrishawk, they're so mellow. I mean, they have their positive traits too.
Sure. And
they're a great bird for somebody who can't hawk every day. Goshawk, you got to stay on top of it every day. I mean, or they'll get, they can get unmanageable. Now, some falconers can't handle a goshawk. Maybe their work schedule or something. And then you got a mess on your hands. So, but I like the challenge of a goshawk.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that do, and a lot of people that swear by them, and once they start flying them, they never go back otherwise. And I don't know. Like I said, I'm probably flying my first one pretty soon. I just, like I said, all these years, seeing a lot of people have, a lot of positive interactions with them, seeing goshawks fly literally almost every year for the last decade that I've kind of been involved in falconry. And seeing also how they are sometimes whenever things don't turn out so well.
Right.
People really need to see those types of birds fly in person quite a bit, I think, before they decide that they should really get one. But.
And then I've flown I started flying the North American goshawk. Mm-hmm. And then I always was intrigued with the white Russian Siberian goshawks. And so I wanted to, this was later on in around 2007 or 8, I think it was. I really wanted to get a white Russian goshawk. But there's only one guy breed them in the States, and the price was just crazy. So I looked into importing. Now, importing birds of prey is almost impossible now. But I imported birds in 2004 and 8 and 10. And finally, I got some white birds, Russian birds in, and I bred them. And the best goshawk I ever had was a bird I bred named Misha. She was a big 1,350 gram flying weight, white albitus Russian goshawk. And she was just a deadly killing bird. I mean, she was fast, she was versatile, she was big, and could maneuver in thick cover. Now, I'll just say something about goshawks real quick. The North Americans are very agile. They're quick off the glove. The Finnish goshawks are fast in open cover, but they're not very maneuverable, especially the females, in thick cover like the heavy sagebrush. The albitus female Russian goshawk is maneuverable like a North American, but they are bigger, so they're not quite as nimble as a North American. But they're very agile still. So you got power. The Siberians can fly they're like sprinters. They fly power sprint. The North Americans sometimes are pacers on longer flights. And the Finns are just power fast straight out, but they're not good at making all the cuts and getting up in the thick cover. So I became in love with a pure Siberian Russian gosh. And that bird, Misha, was an amazing bird. But she flew so hard and so fast that she killed herself in her 4th year. She went full speed into a bush, caught the rabbit, killed it, but she got trauma to the heart and the lungs and died 3 days later. And that broke my heart. It was the best bird I ever had. But that is my breakdown on the goshawks. Now, I have a North American female that I fly, and she's fantastic. She doesn't fly as fast, but on the finish in the thick cover, nothing beats her as far as being able to get into that cover and grab that rabbit. She's pretty amazing. So there's pros and cons to every single type of goshawk out there.
Yeah, I mean, you can say that for almost every species period too, I think. Yeah. It's just I mean, I've gotten a chance to see almost every one of those species fly now. You know, of or species or subspecies or whatever the term you want to use. Each of those, and I've also seen some hybrids fly as well.
There's lots of hybrids out there. The Siberian North American, the Siberian Finns. There's one unique bird that I haven't mentioned, and that is a bird that when I was a kid, they had one for sale for $400 in the San Francisco Chronicle. It's called an ornate hawk eagle. Back then, they had them come into pet stores back in the day. This is talking early 70s. I couldn't afford $400, so I never got one. But I always was infatuated with ornate hawk eagles. Anyway, step forward to 2015 or so, I was able to get a pair of ornate hawk eagles and got very lucky, and they bred right away. And I bred some ornate hawk eagles, and I did fly a female, and I did take rabbits with it. And it's a beautiful bird, very powerful, but they're not a practical falconry bird like a goshawk or a Harris hawk. They're from South America, so they have a very slow metabolism, and they don't catch as much game as you will with a goshawk, let's put it that way. But they're very, very interesting birds.
Well, and I want to ask you too, since you brought that up. I mean, the couple of other people that I've talked to that have that have had experience flying them, have all said they've been pretty slow to mature. Also, like it usually takes them
extremely slow to mature,
2 to 3 seasons,
2 to 3 years,
to really kind of come into their own a little bit and figure things out.
Yes,
so I mean, in the wild, like you were saying, where they're from. I mean, the parents and they're provided for kind of.
They only lay one egg in a clutch.
Yeah.
They only nest once every other year. So they only lay an egg every 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So in captivity, they lay one egg. That's the clutch. But we can double clutch them and sometimes triple clutch them and make 2 or 3 in a year. Yeah, but I was told I have the only breeding pair in the United States. I don't know how true that is. But they are rare. But in the wild, I don't think they're too rare in the wild. I don't think that I think they're fairly doing well.
I mean, in the wild too, though. I mean, like you're saying, I mean, since they breed so kind of somewhat infrequently and produce so few young, like they interact and have a lot longer. I don't know, they're catered to longer in the wild by their parents and stuff.
They hang out with the parents for like a year or so.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a cool bird to have some experience with. I mean, the people that have flown them that I've talked to have enjoyed their time with them, but they said that it's definitely one of those long haul, investment kind of things. Yeah, it would be
best to, if it was like your only bird and you could dedicate a lot of time to it. It's a bird that, for example, my female, when she caught a rabbit, it was almost impossible to get her off that rabbit. Sometimes I'd have to pick her up with the rabbit and put it in the back of the truck and let her eat it on the way home, and then I could get her off it. She just was stubborn about that. But she hooded well. She had a great personality. And of course, they're beautiful birds with that crest and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a lot of their appeal, for sure, especially as far as, I mean, I kind of wish that there would end up being some more people that would breed some of those types of more rarer, hard to get species.
Yeah, they're not as big as you think, but they're really powerful. A female ornate hawk eagle flies around 1,600 grams, and a male 800 to 900 grams. Not big, but they're a lot like, I would call them in between in personality and whatnot, kind of in between a Harris hawk and a goshawk. They can be high strung. And then other instances, they can be super mellow. But that was another bird that bird and the gyrfalcon and the goshawk are the 3 birds that I've always been infatuated with, and I still am to this day.
And as far as, so going back to, whenever you got into the breeding then finally and started producing these birds for yourself and everything, did you start off small and stay smaller, or did you find yourself kind of how a lot of people find themselves and start, kind of growing pretty quick as far as
around 1992, I had one pair and they bred at 3. And I was like, I was pretty exciting because it was a new thing and everything. And then you got to learn how to hatch, you double clutch and hatch the eggs, and you're learning that process. you've got the early failures, eggs not hatching, and you're doing things wrong. And but then I started figuring it out. And I was always Dave Jamieson, Steve Baptiste, I was picking their brain all the time. They're my mentors. And Dave, I'd come up here all the time. We'd go out to lunch. And so basically information from them and what I read, I figured it out. And then I started to get another pair or two. And then in California where I was breeding them, it was very hot. It was not a great place to raise gyrfalcons. And but I was breeding probably in the 90s, 10, 15 falcons a year. And then I decided I want to move to Nevada, where the climate was cooler. I mean, in the summer, we might hit 95, but 95 here is low humidity. It's nothing like 100 or 110 in the Central Valley of California. And in the winter, it's real cold, which they love. So they thrived here. And then I started picking up some more birds from Steve and Dave and breeding birds and holding back birds. And I started getting, started increasing. I would say in the year 2000 on to 2010, I was breeding 40 birds a year. And I would say back in 2010 or so, I was probably doing 80 birds a year. But as the time's gone by, I've been cutting back. I think I bred 40 birds this year, but I would like to cut back to just, I'm getting older. My son is a falconer, Ryan. He wants to do this. So because of that, I haven't cut back a lot yet. But I would like to cut back to, I know my wife would like me to cut back to maybe breeding like 20 birds a year.
So it's not something that you ever see yourself completely getting out of. I think I would get really bored. I mean, I would like to just have a couple pairs or something just to keep you going. But the guy that was, there's some guys saying, people used to tell me, you're not going to make any money doing that. That's ridiculous. That's just birds. I remember my neighbor said, what do you really do? I mean, they think these are pigeons, like they're worth $5. But I never told them what I was getting for the birds, and I'm not going to tell you now. But I made a good living where I was able to do what I wanted to do on my own without having to work for somebody. And if you can do that with what you love and make a living at it, that's the best thing in the world. Yeah, no, you're not going to get any argument out of me on that. That's for sure. I've told lots of other people. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out how to do that.
I mean, now I can wind down, and I've done well and saved money and stuff and have investments. So I don't feel the pressure I used to have, like I would when I used to have a mortgage or something. So now it's much more relaxing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I think everybody hopes to get to that point at some point in their life where they're doing something they enjoy and supporting themselves and their families with that. I'm like you though. I think I would get, if I didn't have all the side stuff going on that I do, I would get almost too bored and usually when I have too much time to think, that doesn't bode well for me.
Now but it's not all roses. Okay.
Sure.
The negatives is my wife and I can't go anywhere in the summer. We can never go really on a vacation. We're locked down to the birds. They got to be fed, once, twice a day. Bath water is changed. I mean, you can't really go anywhere until you've shipped the birds out to the falconers, and then after that, you can relax in the fall. But it's a big commitment, and it's not all gravy.
Yeah, I mean, that's something else that's a pretty common theme for any breeder that I talk to. And I've had a chance now and to see a lot of different projects and everybody says the exact same thing. I mean, you have to be extremely dedicated to it. It's not something that you can just kind of slack off on your scrutiny, with it, because I mean, you have to be available to address something right then and there if it's not going right. And like you said, there's like 4 to 5 months out of the year where you're just kind of, just you can't do anything but worry about that. So, yeah.
Exactly. And there's so much involved in breeding birds. You got to keep the chambers clean. You got to keep the bath pans going good. You got to make sure their beaks aren't overgrown. And then with the babies, you got to make sure all the babies are getting fed enough, but you don't want to overfeed and have wasteful food in the chambers. There's constant things that you have to be on top of. And if you were if you're working full time and doing that, it would be more difficult. I know there's people that do it, but if you had a full-time job and did the breeding, I think that would definitely be more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely wouldn't be able to have a project of any substantial size that way, I wouldn't think.
Right.
Right. I mean, I've not ever seen anybody have another separate job or career for the most part. Well, I'll take that back. I have, but the ones that I have seen that have had a separate job or career while they've been doing it, they've been able to work remotely or be home a lot.
Right.
Or they're in a situation where if something does happen, they're able to keep an eye on things with cameras and stuff. And if something does go wrong, they're either themselves or someone that they know that's on site can immediately
they figure
address
it out. Sure.
Yeah. I admire people.
I mean, if you just
lot.
have a couple pairs and you have a full-time job, I'm sure you could make it work. But if you have a lot of pairs and you really got to stay on top of it, you really need to be around.
Yeah, I admire people's diligence and dedication that have a lot of respect for people that have breeding projects. It's just a lot of work.
I mean, there are times, I think, gosh, sometimes it would just be nice just to have one bird, not have to worry about anything else. But in the end, I don't know. It's, you get, I guess it's like a sickness. You want to be with the birds. So
yeah. I mean, it's like a lot of people use the word obsession and
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You almost have to be a little sick in the head.
Yeah, and falconers are good at that.
Yeah. Very, very true. Well, and over the years, I mean, have you still been able to, one thing I like to talk about too, especially with breeders like yourself, and I mean, how has it affected your personal falconry? Have you had to sacrifice a lot of personal falconry time in order to maintain
Well, fortunately, I live in a nice area where, my training field is like 5 minutes away. So, and I like getting up early anyway and going out with the falcon, taking the dog out and training him. It's kind of a routine. And by the time September, October comes around, when you're starting to fly again, the breeding's wound down. So it works out fine.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that, for whatever reason, though, I know they have to sacrifice one or the other because of their own personal circumstances, and time commitments and everything else. So I was just curious. I'm glad that you haven't really had to sacrifice that too much. I mean, I know that over the past, 4 years and stuff for me, I mean, doing all this other side stuff and everything, and doing like work, travel work and stuff, it's been kind of a bummer for me having to occasionally sacrifice and have some downtime with my own personal falconry and things like that. I mean, it kind of happened by default anyway, just because of my work situation, but it feels like you're definitely missing something.
So the falcon, to go hunt sage grouse or something, I got to go a lot longer. So that doesn't happen as much as I used to.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where the goshawk really comes in. I can get in my car with my goshawk every day, go to a field and walk. And that's the other thing I like about it. It's really good exercise. Hiking through the bushes and the brush and the ditches for 6-7 miles, burning a bunch of calories and looking for rabbits. And just getting out there and doing the hiking with the bird I really look forward to. And that's something I can do every day. The falcon, I can fly every day, but to go hunting with a falcon is a lot more involved now than it used to be because of the distance I have to go to find game. Finding game now is more difficult, as a lot of falconers know, than it used to be. Numbers are down in some areas. And in the areas where they're up, it's a longer distance.
And as far as any other kind of aspects of your falcon, I mean, do you did you just say do you use dogs pretty commonly?
I use English pointer.
Okay.
Yeah, I have an English pointer. I've always had an English pointer. The best English pointer I ever had, I got from a kennel called Elhew Kennels, from a dog named Snakefoot. A lot of people who know Elhew dogs will know about Snakefoot. Snakefoot was a national champion, a really, really neat dog. The funny story on that, because Bob Whaley was the founder of Elhew Kennels, and Bob Whaley, he had all the money in the world, so he kept anything that looked good, he kept them. You couldn't get a pup from him. This one particular time, I wanted a pup, and he had a heart attack, and he was in the hospital, and the lady who ran his operation said, well, he would never let you have this dog, but I'm going to send you this female. I named her Elsa, and Elsa was this orange and white English pointer. I got her at 8 weeks old, and that was my best dog ever. She was just a wonderful dog, and she was directly out of Snakefoot. But now I have an Elhew dog. Well, he's no longer, Elhew died, so Bob Whaley died. So that kennel went down, but there were people still breed the bloodline, and I have a dog from that bloodline now. Yeah.
So it's always been and will continue to be English pointers for you then?
My son has a Gordon,
Setter.
I'm sorry, a Cocker Spaniel.
Okay.
A field Cocker Spaniel. His name's Bo, and I'm pretty impressed with that dog. That dog is pretty amazing, and I like English setters too. My dad was a big field, and his other hobby when he was a falconer was English setters. He founded the Diablo setter line. There was some well-known Diablo dogs back in the 70s. He was an amateur dog trainer. My dad's name was Al Moglich, and he had all-age English setters. And the Diablo line, we lived near Mount Diablo in Walnut Creek, so he called it the Diablo line. Anyway, there were some really well-known Diablo dogs back in that day, and there were some well-known dogs still have that bloodline way back when, if you go through their pedigree. So English setters, the ones he ran in amateurs, were big running dogs. I mean, they go out 2 miles sometimes. But no, English setters are good dogs too.
Yeah, I've gotten a chance to see each of those breeds, and I know for the Midwest dirt hawking type of stuff. I mean, if you got like bigger open fields and stuff, I mean, like I said, I like cockers. I don't know if you've been told or not. I'm more of a dachshund guy myself. That's
dachshund, yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm always curious to see what dogs people are running. I mean, it seems like that there's the same handful of breeds that you continually hear about, whether it's from, long wingers love this particular few, and it seems like dirt hawkers love this particular few.
I've seen in back east, a lot of them use these little, what do they call them? They're little wiener dogs. I don't know what they call them. But they use them they go in the holes and get the rabbits out.
Yeah, it's the long-haired.
Long-haired dachshund.
Yeah, mini dachshunds, yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I am impressed. But I don't live in an area. The rabbits where we are, most of them aren't in holes.
Sure. Yeah.
Mostly jackrabbits and some cottontail. Mm-hmm. And some of the cottontails go in holes, but we don't have a lot of holes, so I don't know if it'd be as beneficial here.
Well, and even where I'm at in southern Indiana, there's not a lot of hole work where I'm at either. It's more like, and especially like, the Jersey crew that I've gotten to know pretty well. I mean, they do a lot of hole work there because rabbits are harder to come by.
Yeah, like Casey Everett.
Uh-huh, yeah.
Casey Everett flies one of my Goshawks.
Mm-hmm.
And last year he flew this bird named Betsy, a North American bird I bred. Mm-hmm. And the way he works that bird with his little dog is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I've gotten to know Casey pretty well. And we're buds. And then a lot of the guys out east I've gotten to know fairly well. I did a whole series with around dachshunds and stuff with them. And
very impressive.
So, yeah. Yeah, they're good dudes, and I've gotten also to know Teddy fairly well and stuff too. And yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun seeing them do all that stuff with their dogs. Like I said, where I'm at though, it doesn't require very much in the way of hole work and stuff because, it's just they tend to just stay in the thicker cover and the briars and things like that. So it's going to ground isn't quite as important where I'm at, but it is for other areas. So
right.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah. I knew that he had flown one of your birds and stuff. I couldn't remember which one it was.
Yeah, he posts the videos on Instagram, and it's fun to keep track of how they're doing.
Yeah, it's been cool getting a chance to know a lot of different people that do a lot of different stuff, and yeah, it's cool, man. Like I'm glad that you the more of these kind of things I do, the more I find that I continue to know mutual people, and that it's like the falconry 6 degrees of separation thing.
It's interesting to see because for example, Casey's in a different kind of environment. He's in very thick cover with, and then and he hunts primarily bunnies, cottontails, and squirrels, tree squirrels. And, him and I have had a big discussion about that as far as different goshawks. And he's flown Siberians. He's flown, he flew a tercel Siberian from me that got electrocuted. And then he's got the female North American. And he said, where his cover is, the most successful game hawk has been the North American, only because the cover is so thick. But maybe he'll change that opinion again, but right now that's what he told me. So it's interesting to hear how different birds do in different cover.
Yeah, and it's funny too. I think that opinion, even in different areas with similar cover, it's still going to vary as far as the opinion goes, depending on the falconer too.
Absolutely. And we all, especially falconers, we all have our own opinions. We're all experts,
It's something that comes up almost every episode that I do. We always mention falconers and their opinions.
But I will tell you this: when young falconers ask me all these questions, I always tell them one thing: listen, I am still learning to this day. There's things that happen that I never had happen to me before. So I definitely don't know everything. I am still learning, and I will always be learning. Because once you think you know everything, well, then I don't know what to say. But I'm nowhere near that.
Yeah, and what's the point in continuing to do it if you've already learned it all?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm always leery of people that kind of allude to or make, kind of comments here and there that they feel like they're an expert in anything. And I mean, some people, sure, they can get close or whatever, but as you just said, I mean, you could fly these birds until like the minute you're born until the minute you die, and there always are going to be something there's always going to be some that will teach you something
some
new.
People are going to disagree with me and say the Harrisock's the best thing since sliced bread, and someone else is going to disagree with that. We're all got our own opinions, and that's just fine.
Yeah, I think it largely depends on how you're flying them too. I know Casey and a lot of the guys out there are willing to fly their goshawks from trees and stuff too, whereas a lot of the other guys that I hunt with are strictly from the
strictly from the fist, but I'm not in trees. Back in the 70s, my dad used to fly a tercel Harrisock in these walnut orchards, and back in that day in California, they migrated. I don't know how they got into California, but loaded with these eastern fox squirrels. And that was fun to watch. A little dangerous because the bite on those fox squirrels, they're pretty big squirrels.
Yeah.
But he used to catch those, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, especially for a tiercel, that's yeah, I mean, there's been plenty of, heck, there's plenty of, even bigger female red tails that sometimes get bitten by some of the bigger fox squirrels too. And then I've seen red tails get turned off. They'll still go after gray squirrels and stuff, but but they don't want to go after fox squirrels so much anymore. So yeah, I mean, it's a tall order for some of these. We ask a lot of these birds, and sometimes we forget, just how much we ask out of these birds. We ask a lot. I mean, if roles were reversed, I'm not really sure how well that would go.
Right. Oh, the fact that you could, look, I used to have parrots and all kinds of birds. But the fact that you can teach a bird, well, not teach it, train it to hunt with you, it's just amazing. And I always thought that was something. It's not like your normal, it's not like a normal pet that just sits at home, These birds get to go out into the wild, and if they want to fly away, they can fly away. And they're free. We're letting them go free. I mean, modern day with the telemetry and the GPS is pretty neat. I mean, back in the day, we didn't have anything to put on them, and it was easier to lose them.
Sure. Yeah. It's always nice to kind of be reminded sometimes that, back in the day, I mean, it was so much harder, at times to kind of keep track of. I mean, we're actually pretty spoiled these days, and
absolutely
the technology that we have. And
I mean, back in the day, you couldn't get a gyrfalcon. My first gyrfalcon, I think, came from Dave Jamieson, and I paid a pretty penny for that, and just to have it was amazing. And but now, they're readily available, and falconers. The young falconers just don't know how easy they got it now. I mean, it's like going to the candy store. You got every flavor available, and they need to really appreciate what's available now.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a dollar for every time somebody, basically has mentioned that, it's just the availability of the birds versus the the lack of hunting spots and quarry, now, or the kind of the inverse,
exactly,
the inverse ratio of how that's gone over time and stuff, man. It's just, like I said, I mean, I think people, even me, I mean, it's hard for me to even appreciate, like, people tell me all these stories all the time about how, all this quarry was so abundant and all these spots were just so plentiful and everything, but they couldn't hardly get any birds. Their diversity in their choice of birds and stuff, it was almost non-existent. And then it's hard to appreciate that if you don't ever have to actually experience that for yourself.
Right. And it's not so much the quantity we catch, but the quality. Watching a gyrfalcon come down and hit a sage grouse and whack it out of the sky. I mean, maybe you get that a few times a year, but it's something you'll remember in your mind over and over again all year round.
Well, and to that end, I guess now would be a good time to, ask you more about, of all the birds that you fly. I mean, you've already kind of talked a little bit about, a couple of the birds that you've flown that you miss but as far as particular flights, I mean, what's been some of the more memorable one or two flights?
One was a bird named Bullet. Bullet was a very large jerkin. He flew at like 1,200 grams flying weight, which is big for a jerkin. And he was a chamber raised bird. And I took my son with me, and we went out to northern Nevada. And I'll remember the bird was like over 1,000 feet. And this flock of sage grouse got up. He came straight down, hit that grouse, killed it on impact, a boomer, and then threw up and hit another grouse and almost caught it. And I thought, God, that would have been pretty cool if it had caught two in one flight. I'm sure somebody's maybe Steve Chingren or somebody's done it, but I haven't done it. But I thought that was cool. That was one very memorable flight.
And as far as like, the Goshawks and stuff, I mean, has there been any other like super memorable, experiences that you've had with them other than the one that you told earlier as well? I mean, just, so were you mainly more of, did you like hunting jackrabbits most?
Jackrabbits and
the Goshawks?
In the thick sagebrush in the desert.
Yeah.
Yeah, Misha was about as deadly as they got. But she could, the way she could get up 6 times and then catch it. But one of the most memorable flights was hers also. So she had a tendency to want to bait way out, and I tried to hold her back. One time I let her go. And she just took off. I mean, straight in a beeline. I knew she saw a jack. But I thought, where the heck? I tracked her down 2 miles. And when I got there, she had already killed it and was eating it. It was I'm guessing that rabbit was almost a mile away. That I did notice that in the Siberians. Some of them, not all of them. They're all different. But that bird was unbelievable. And when she does take off, it's full speed the whole time, no cruising. But yeah, that was like a 2-mile flight.
Jeez.
So I will never forget that one. I have another one, a different Siberian, that used to drive me crazy. What she would do is she would chase the rabbit long distance. If she missed it, she would sit there. But if she saw anything moving before I got there, she would take off after that one. And one time I spent like 3 hours trying to get her because she kept chasing all these rabbits. I guess it was a good thing there were a lot of rabbits, but that was the thing about that bird that drove me crazy. She would not sit still at all. And then I used to have a peregrine when I lived in California. Before I moved to Nevada, this was like 1997. This bird was a half Peels, half red-naped Shaheen. She was a master at coming down and going and ripping the wing underneath the wing and just dropping the pheasant. And when I brought her so she caught pheasants, wild pheasants. Back in the day when there were a lot of pheasants, she was really effective. So when I brought her up to Nevada, hunted her on sage grouse, the very first sage grouse she saw, she came down and ripped it wide open, the chest and through the wing, and just dropped it. That was a bird that was quite a. It was a precision killer. It really knew what to do.
And do you think, I mean, I know you said you would get bored if you didn't have a lot of this other stuff to continue to do, but I mean, do you think you'll always be continuing to fly both species, or do you think eventually you're just going to switch to just one, or?
Well, as long as I'm healthy and active, which I am now, and healthy, I think I'll fly both. Do it as long as you can.
For sure. Yeah, because you never know when you're not going to be able to do it anymore.
I think when people stop doing what they like to do, then I don't know. It doesn't sound like fun to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think whenever people are kind of forced to give up some of those, that's when you start having the mental and other declines, unfortunately.
Yeah, like what's retirement? So the Joe Blow down the street, let's say he worked this job from 8 to 5 at this corporation for 50 years, and then he retires, and then what does he do? Goes golfing and sits around, and hopefully he's got some hobbies, but I would go crazy. I could not do, I couldn't do the normal retirement thing. Just couldn't do it. It's not me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I there's no way I'd be able to do that either. I've gone through stages in my life before where I've just not really had much else going on, and you sit there and just watch TV or whatever, and then you're just sitting there thinking like, "What? I should be doing something." It's that whole like anytime I feel like I'm not doing something productive, I get antsy, and start to think myself into bad places for sure. But
that's the one thing about breeding birds; it definitely keeps you busy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I can see that. I mean, even a smaller setup, would still be. You still gotta keep an eye on it.
There.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. If you only have, like, say, 3 or 4 pairs, the difference between having 3 or 4 pairs or 15 pairs, you still gotta be there.
Yeah, there's still the same amount of diligence. You still gotta be there in person and keep an eye on it. Otherwise, bad things are probably gonna happen. But well, and so before we kind of finish up, the other thing I wanted to make sure I cover with you also, or ask you, is you've already kind of given some sentiments or some degree of thoughts in this conversation, but I always ask people for a piece of advice or some kind of thought or sentiment, like whatever they'd like to ideally pass along to like new and aspiring falconers, or even ones that have been in it for a while. What's been like the best lesson you've learned over the years, and what do you think is really important for people to take into account and consider?
Well, I mean, falconry takes a lot of time. You got to really love the sport to really. If you just kind of like it, I don't know how you're going to be that successful. You got to be dedicated. Some falconers are not that dedicated. Some falconers really don't hunt that much. I'd like, I mean, I know a lot of falconers really are committed to it, but there are some, they have a bird, they like the bird, but they're not committed. Like some, but my advice would be basically that, you want to do something you love. And if you love it, then great, and continue doing it. Now, with breeding, my advice would be, it's not going to be like it was in the old days. You're not going to get prices for your birds like it used to be. There's far more competition than there used to be. And I don't know if I'd do it now if I was starting now. I'm not going to say don't do it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'd really do some research before you consider breeding and think you're going to make money. Because listen, quail are, like $3 a piece. There's so much, and there's a lot of cost. And you feed one of those quail a day times how many birds you got. Let's say you have 20 birds. What's that? $60 a day? It's not cheap. And if you go on some of these sites now, birds for sale, they're all over the place. So there's a lot more competition. And I would say do your research and talk to other breeders. I was lucky I had Dave Jamieson. Now, Dave Jamieson and Steve Baptiste, they're like one of the first people to breed birds of prey. I was lucky enough to live only 3 hours from them and see them all the time.
Yeah, that's good advice. I mean, the old saying goes, I mean, it's just like anytime you buy a bird, you're not really buying the bird, you're buying the time, effort, and energy plus the food to feed them, more or less. That's why I have a much different outlook now whenever I deal with
prices for the birds have come down and the cost of feeding them has gone up. Now, there's still some birds that are very valuable, don't get me wrong, but it's much more selective than it used to be.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work and time, effort, and energy that goes into acquiring birds also that can produce those particular genetics and stuff as well.
Right, and some people, it would be difficult getting some of those genetics because, they're going to want to keep them for breeding.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, is there anything else that we've kind of talked about or haven't talked about, I should say, in this conversation that you think is worth discussing before we start to wrap this up here? Or?
Well, I think we pretty much covered it pretty good. People want to see our birds, they can go on Instagram.
Yeah.
To American Gyrs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's basically, is there any other, you don't have an official website or anything?
AmericanGyrs.com.
Okay.
But nowadays, I hardly use the website anymore. It's Instagram.
Yeah.
I don't do Facebook. I don't do anything but the Instagram is just easy for me. I'm old school, so I don't chit chat on the internet that much.
Well, and let's be honest, Facebook kind of sucks to deal with anyway. Not a big fan.
I never had an account.
Yeah, you're not really missing much, even though Instagram's owned by Facebook and all that. It's just I like the format and the style of Instagram better also. But yeah. So anyway, I guess we can go ahead and wrap this up. It's been about an hour and stuff. I just wanted to, like I said, say thanks again. And
okay, thanks for having me.
I appreciate your time and stuff. And appreciate it. And hopefully see you again soon.
Okay, well, thanks a lot.
Yeah.